In fact, when I had asked him about why are the people complaining about taking bribes, he painted a very stereotypical image of them as, ma'am, these are tribals. Do you think that I will ever take like panga with them, in the sense that almost painting them as uncivilized brutes that he wouldn't dare mess around with. On the other hand, in Ladakh, in Leh, when I asked him that, this is hard work, is it safe enough? Are you taking, like, how do you take enough care of them? He says, we hire them, madam, because they're strong and loyal. Look at them work, nothing ever happens to them. So in many ways, he's naturalizing the fact that as if these build, I mean, very much like, even though this is paid work, but very much like, naturalizing the fact that somehow these bodies are designed to do this hard labor. On the other hand, we also spoke with a lot of mates, and the mates have, they construct the workers as, so especially for the mate, our question was that you take so much, like they take a lot of cut from border roads organization, gives a very decent salary or promises a very decent salary, and also now had, like, since 2013 or 15 started making bank accounts and putting money in there for the laborers, but the mates still have managed to get their cut. They'll either give a loan to the laborers earlier in advance and take a huge interest, and then also charge them hugely for bringing them here and feeding them and all of that. In many ways controlling their money, because many laborers don't even know how to operate an ATM card, for example, or to transfer money back home. So the mate replies to us saying, these are young people and do not know how to take care of money. They will spend it all and will have nothing to show when they get back. I have to scold them sometimes, just like my own children. So infantilizing, I mean, and many of these men are like, there are some who are, let's say, 17, 18 years old, but there are many who are in their 40s also. So it's a big range. And but what his narrative basically infantilizes them and takes away their own agency or control over their own money from them. But the mate also has a very similar narrative when he speaks about the government. He says, I am working towards building this country. I give employment to so many people from my district. Otherwise, they would have wasted their lives. All their needs that the BRO should have taken care of, I do. I am doing the work of the government. So the mate is really putting himself also, I mean, he's also doing the labor, but he's also making a lot of money. And many of these mates end up making a lot of money and then going and starting off like petty contractual jobs elsewhere. Yeah, you can move to the next slide. Then we spoke to many laborers, and they don't see themselves as these young people who don't know how to take care of themselves, or I mean, they very much see themselves as serious and strong agents in the development and defense of the country. I mean, Ansari tells me that an army man dies only during a war. Here we can die any day, because their tents are pitched like right next to the road where they're constructing. So if like a landslide happens, like it's very, very risky. And also when they do blasting, this other one, drilling is dangerous. The loose mountain rocks can fall on me anytime. This is not a job for the faint-hearted. It's a man's job. I've discussed the gendered connotations of this work in my gender, place and culture paper. And in this EPW paper, I'll talk about the serious need for BRO, which we are now pushing BRO also to do, and the government to pay attention to their health and safety. Because, I mean, and this, like, one of the workers only really pushed me to think in that direction when he asked me, he was somewhat drunk also, but he says, मैं भी तो हिंदुस्तान हूँ, फिर मेरी हिफाजत कौन करेगा? Like, these are things being built for the national security, for national development. But how come the people who've been building these roads for generations, their economic and human development is not happening? What about their safety, their security? So, some of those things I address in this Narratives of Health paper. If we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So also since the like I said, the men are staying alongside the road they're constructing. Sometimes on the top left you see an image of these hutments that they build out of So there are these metal barrels that in which tar comes. So after the tar is finished, they lay it out on the road and then they flatten it with the road roller. So they get these flattened metal sheets that are used to construct some of these hutments. Sometimes they use tarpal. Sometimes they find access to canvas. The cooking, and depending on the altitude, sometimes cooking happens outside if they can find wood fire. Otherwise, it happens on a kerosene lamp inside the house, inside the tent. So the same tent in which they're sleeping becomes a cooking place during the day, especially if it's a very, very cold, higher altitude kind of a space. And they have, like, each one of them has, like, just about as much space as one needs to sleep, because there are 40 men inside the same tent. And here also, I think, I mean, this story about how people live when they're constructing roads for the nation is an important one. And from when we speak to the workers, they really explain the story again in a very interesting way, because back home, none of them is going to ever do cooking or washing clothes. Those are again very gendered activities, but here they're doing. So when I ask them about, so how do you feel about doing all of these works over here? Then they explain this work in a very in a way that this requires, I mean, this is still not a woman's job, because this requires courage. It's very hard. High altitude cooking is hard. Washing clothes requires courage. Bathing is impossible. The water is straight from the glacier. Which it is. In fact, many of them are unable to have a bath for the most part, because heating water is a luxury for them. And maybe the mate will give them access to some warm water once a month or once a week, depending on where they are. We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, the story becomes takes quite a different turn when they come back home, back to Jharkhand. And I think all of us have seen these movie scenes now, where the army officer or the army jawan will return home, and the whole village or the town is like there for the welcome, because of their bravery and being in hardship. Well, they almost receive a very similar welcome, which is quite heartening to see. What they do is that they'll come back to the railway station, rent the fanciest looking car that they can find or afford, stop the car at some nala on the way, or like a rivulet, clean rivulet. And because many of them haven't bathed for at least a month, they will have a bath, wear nice, clean, new clothes, buy gifts for their families and relatives, sweets, and come home as heroes. So, and back home, that whole gender dimension of being considered effeminate or infantile totally reverses. In some narratives, I find, like, 17-year-olds who've gone to work say that I was a boy when I left and I am a man now. So this has been a passive transition, for his growing up. They will flaunt their t-shirts or sweatshirts saying Khardungla 18,380 feet. I have been there, and in fact they will tell you that I worked on that road, I built that road. Some of them would have been able to manage to buy a fancy phone or a nice bike. Others contribute towards either a healthcare or a education or a house building need for their family. Yeah, some narratives from those that have come back. I mean, this is Janab. He was 15. He says, I had run away from home to work in the BRO. Before that, everyone treated me like a child, and now they see me as a man. This is Rani. In fact, she's the woman in that picture that we saw earlier. And she was very upset with her husband when we met her, because they had just gotten married, and then he left her, and then meanwhile, every time he would come, there would be one kid, and so she was left to take care of the kids and the elderly parents. If I had known that my husband would go away soon after we married, leaving me to take care of his parents alone, I would have never married him. Then Ansari, and also it's very interesting to see the aspirations that many of them come with. So he says, I want to go to Himachal maybe 2 or 3 more times, then I can save enough money to go and work in Saudi Arabia. I want to be financially stable before I get married. So, compared to what life would have been like for them, let's say working for a private contractor in a bigger city in India, working for the BRO in some ways has afforded, if they don't get cheated by the mate, them to accumulate small amounts of money that can maybe perhaps allow them to buy one item of let's say consumer or goods, or maybe take care of a family health need, or maybe be able to get married with some bit of backup. But it is still not enough to have them not need to go back the next time. I mean, many of the men we met have been doing this for the past 20 years, and yet every time they go on this journey, they are looked at as unskilled labor only. In another one of my papers on in Geoforum, I've spoken about how I've written about how in fact they've become quite experts in many of the things. They know much more than some of the junior engineers from Gref who try to be over ambitious with their the dynamite and all of that. And experience has really taught many of these workers quite a bit. So in that, I question this notion of unskilled, like paying somebody as unskilled and skilled, and like skill. Even breaking a rock requires skill. It's not that easy to know how to break a rock with your hands and hammer, and to avoid a flint falling into your eye. That requires quite some skill from their end. Yeah, so I will end this part of the story here. These are the teams that have accompanied me over the years. And maybe if I can take a couple more minutes to talk about my recent work in Lahore. So Lahore had been pushing for the tunnel for decades, like for several decades. And pretty much everybody is very excited about the Rohtang tunnel, the Atal tunnel having come up. And yet a lot of the things in there, like Lahore used to be closed previously during the winter months, right? So now suddenly it has opened up, and it's pretty much open now 12 months in the year. And so there are changes in the agricultural dimension, in the sense that initially they would be more focused on growing crops for their own sustainability, and now they've started to grow apple, they're growing cabbage, broccoli, and therefore, so now they have access to a cash economy, which is quite interesting, but it's bringing a lot of social changes. For example, not they've had this custom of having one son remain at home to take care of their lands and their property, whatever their houses. And usually the rest of the family would migrate to the other parts of Himachal, get a government position, or be sent off to a monastery. And many of them did very well in the services, in the government services also. And there was usually one person from the family who stayed back to take care. Now everybody knowing that uh, knowing that there is going to be intense tourism coming back into Lahore, a lot of those families are coming back, family members are coming back and asking for their share of the land. So that's creating a lot of family conflicts in the region. Also, the presence of tourists has created both aspirations and fears. Because, for example, last year, when the tunnel just opened, there were huge traffic jams in places which had never really seen that many vehicles. And the problem of waste management became huge. Many of them left behind, like, uh, like the tourist season basically left behind tons of waste in what was previously more of a protected land. So just a few minor problems or changes. But on the other hand, the locals have started investing in the local Lahore government really pushed for homestays, because right now apparently Lahore had the capacity to house I think 2,000 people a day, and the DC said that we need to house about 10,000 people a day, so people should open up homestays. Many of them did also, but then they had a few incidents with young men coming in to families and maybe drinking or not behaving the way was that was appreciated by the locals. So those tensions are happening. So now what I've been trying to do is map the social and the political impacts of what this very, very critical strategic infrastructure would have on Lahaul and Spiti. Thank you.